So we have James Lombardi, who is a graduate, as I explained to you before. I've already seen your profile and everything else. So maybe you could tell us a little bit again, not for you, but for everyone else. How did you end up? How did you get that first job? Was it networking? Was it on-campus recruitment or whatever? And then tell us about what it is that you do. I think one of the students interested because that's something that is interested in actual studies, actual work. And then I'd like to spend some time for you to hear about some of the projects that they're working on. And who knows, it could be of interest to you at some level in terms of, because we work with lots of third-party companies where, not for an internship or anything like that, but doing research project for some companies. So Jim, why don't you maybe you could start and tell us a little bit about how you got that first job?
That sounds great. I'll talk about that and kind of just give a quick introduction, and then we can talk about any questions that you guys have, as well as talk about the projects. Like Professor Zora mentioned, I was part of this master's program about 10 years ago. I'd been an undergrad at Lehigh before that. And I started my career with the Canadian life insurer, Sun Life Financial. I was able to get the job in part because I was able to show that the experience as part of this master's program, learning the technical concepts, showing that they were a good fit. In this career path, also having actuarial exams is key to getting an entry-level position. There's a series of professional exams that you need to pass. So having the first couple passed is very helpful. So I started with Sun Life Financial. I've worked for the last 6 years at a different life insurance company, John Hancock. And my role right now is in product development. So I work as a pricing actuary, meaning that I lead the projects to redesign and reprice different life insurance products. I know the Masters of Financial Engineering isn't necessarily like directly tailored towards the actuarial career path, but I've found that there is significant overlap, and I think that even if like the classes you're taking aren't necessarily like teaching exactly to the actuarial exams, I do think that anyone in this program with a few weeks of study can probably pass the first couple. Because the first couple just deal with probability, which I know all of you know super well. And then the second one is like financial mathematics. So in both cases, it's something that it's a pretty good fit. And so I guess I also wanted to just talk about what is an actuary, because some of you, it's not as well known as some of the other professions. Actuaries use math, statistics, modeling, coding, in order to quantify the financial impact of future events. So you'll most commonly find actuaries at insurance companies, including in some of the more senior positions, because the whole insurance industry is based around charging appropriately for risk. So you'll see actuaries working to calculate survival and mortality probabilities in life insurance. You'll also see actuaries using predictive modeling to forecast losses from car accidents, property losses from fires, hurricanes, cost of medical procedures. Like it's in many different industries, even like pensions, Social Security. It's those places where there's an uncertain future event and you need to put a financial cost on that. So that's kind of my brief primer on kind of the field. Is there any questions so far in any of that? As far as the actuarial career path, you often get hired as part of a rotational program. So one of the advantages is that you're able to work towards your credential, your fellowship, and take these exams while you're working. You don't need to like go back for law degree or like a med degree. You're able to pass these exams while you're working a 40-hour-a-week job. So you're expected to typically take an exam every 6 months. The exams are very challenging. The pass rates are roughly 50%. So it takes many people 4 to 6 years to get through all of these exams and get their fellowship, their FSA or FCAS. But there's also some perks. There's paid time off to study that the companies give you. They pay for your exam fees and your study materials. They even give you raises and bonuses upon passing each exam. So that's kind of a nice nugget to keep you going along. The fact that you can, it's one of those career paths where in 5 years, you can perhaps double your starting salary. So there's definitely perks there. And that's part of what's led it to be one of the top ranked career paths. There's also, it's known for having fairly good stability and work-life balance relative to fields like, say, law or banking. So I've been pretty lucky. It's definitely opened up some cool opportunities for me. I've gotten to run the Boston Marathon through my company's team. I got to sit behind home plate at Fenway Park for a game once through the company. So it's been a good experience for me, and I've been able to have a broad exposure to a bunch of different areas of the company through the rotational program.
So Jim, one thing you forgot, you kind of skipped over the beginning. How did you actually get to the first job from by the time you graduated and you work for that Canadian company? How did you get there?
So that job, I was, when I was graduating the program in 2011, it was sort of like now, it was a pretty tough job market. So I was very flexible on location at the time. I was applying to insurance companies in every major city, essentially. And I was able to get the first 2 actuarial exams passed. I think that's typically going to be something that an insurance company is looking for, is having those first 2, because that'll typically show that you can do it. If you can pass the first 2, you could probably pass the next 7 or 8 with enough study time. So having the first 2 exams was key, and also being able to really speak to the fact that the different courses in the master's program were a good fit. I was able to kind of speak to the fact that we did like a whole project on risk assessment. Terms like conditional tail expectation came up during the interviews. It's like being able to speak to all of that is definitely helpful.
Okay. Did you say that? If you passed, how many exams are there altogether? I thought
it keeps changing. I usually say about between 8 and 11. It depends on what you kind of consider an exam, but it is a long path. But if you're in this program, you probably already are very good at math and statistics and taking exams. So so in some ways it's a good career path in the sense that you have that chance to continue developing in the first few years through demonstrating technical progress. That being said, it's also a very applied field. Technical skills alone won't necessarily get you too far. The communication is very key, and I could get to that, of course, when I start talking about my day-to-day work. It's a lot of cross-functional teams, a lot of solving business problems. So it's a lot of being able to kind of lead meetings. So it's kind of a good blend of kind of business skills as well as technical skills.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for that. It's a really interesting journey. I'd just like to understand, you said you were part of the product development team. If you could just speak to that, I'm just curious what kind of products maybe within that actual space that you're probably talking to or looking at. Thank you.
That's a great question. When I say life insurance, I feel like the thing that probably comes to mind for most people is like term life insurance, like something where you buy pay a certain dollar amount and you're covered for a certain number of years. My company does sell that, but the products that I typically have worked on developing have been what's called universal life insurance. And then a couple different flavors of that. Indexed universal life insurance and variable life insurance are the ones that I've worked on a lot. So it's a pretty fascinating product type because there's a lot of flexibility in how the charges are structured. There's a lot of complications in terms of like the reserves we have to hold on different accounting bases, looking at IFRS accounting as well as kind of the local US accounting. It's also an interesting product because like in the case of indexed universal life and variable universal life, how stocks perform is crucial to how the product performs. So it kind of ties in pretty well with the type of the financial classes that are part of this master's program. A lot of parallels to kind of option pricing because in fact our indexed universal life products are built around a static hedge using options.
Thank you very much. And my second question was actually going to be, what parallels can you draw between what you're doing and the course? So thanks a lot for that. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I rely a lot on some of the learnings from this program. I think I don't necessarily do as much. I don't do like stochastic calculus on a day-to-day basis, but some of those topics have come up, and I have, since graduating, I have had to dust off some of that learning before. So it's been helpful, especially stuff pertaining to hedging.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
This is Randy. I actually spoke with you previously about the actuarial career path. And I am curious that, so I know that there are some people that stop taking exams after they become an associate. And I'm curious like what the additional benefit is exactly for becoming a fellow.
Hi, nice to see you again, Randall. I'm glad that you're kind of pursuing the path. It's good to see another Lehigh person joining the field. And as far as like where you stop with exams, that's really kind of up to you. I mean, a lot of like when you get into one of the student programs, like at a big company, the goal is typically to make it all the way to fellowship. They'll support you along that path. There's usually like a 3-strike rule for exams. If you fail them too many times, they'll stop paying for your materials and giving you time off. But the goal is typically that as long as you're continuing to make progress to get to fellowship, they're investing in you to hopefully get to that point. That being said, I mean, it's hard to spend your nights and weekends studying for exams as you get older. You know, sometimes life gets in the way. So sometimes people do stop after 5 or so and continue practicing. If you're an associate, you can continue, you could sign off on statements. You can do most of the same work. So sometimes people will stop a few exams short of fellowship. Sometimes people work in actuarial roles without having even associateship, just because they like the work and don't really want to take exams too. But if you want to get the highest salaries and as well as kind of the best prospects as far as like moving around in the company, getting fellowship is certainly helpful.
Sounds good. And do you think it's easier to like switch between different companies once you become a fellow?
I would say that once you get your fellowship, you at that point you can really choose between companies based on the role. Whereas if you sometimes like in my case, I wasn't a fellow yet when I did switch between companies. So it meant that I was I had to also make sure that the company I was going to had a good student program, was going to continue to support my success. So once you have your fellowship, it's one less thing to have to worry about as you switch companies. Also, you're going to get recruited more once you get your fellowship. One nice thing about the actuarial career path is that it's in very high demand. Even after you get past 3 or 4 exams and a couple of years of work experience, you'll get recruiters calling you constantly. And so as a fellow, you'll get recruited even that much more. Yeah.
It's interesting that I know there's a CFA, for example, and the FRN on the other side, or next, or whatever you want to call it, but it feels like those exams are really part of your life as an actuarial, right? That you need to take those. I mean, it's nice to, for your knowledge and to move up in your career, but is this like is it like almost like a requirement to be able to sign off on? Because I'm getting the feeling that, yeah, I'm getting the exam for everything else, but if I don't have the exam, I can't sign off on any of these things.
That's exactly right. The exams are more than just kind of like encouraged to have in many cases. In many cases, having fellowship or at least associateship is a requirement to sign off. So for instance, I frequently have to sign off when we prepare a product. I have to prepare like the filing that we prepare for the states, where I attest that we pass the non-forfeiture requirements. I have to attest that we pass illustration requirements. So there's certain sign-offs that have to be done by an actuary. So your professional judgment is relied upon by the states. And that's happened because of the fact that if you go back to like 100 years or more, there had been some high profile failures. You sell a bunch of life insurance products that you're not gonna have to pay out for 20, 30 years. If you don't put aside the funds properly, there's a recipe for disaster there. So and that has happened where the money was mismanaged. So in many areas, an actuary's sign off is actually required, which is why the credentialing is so important. Like pension funding sign-offs need an actuary. A lot of reserve sufficiency statements require an actuary as well as a lot of product filings.
Hey, James. Thank you for your speech today. I have a question about like, what are the learning perspective in this job? Like, do you have to constantly learn new technologies or learn new models to be implemented into your modeling as a daily part of work? And also, since you've been working in the industry for 10 years, more than 10 years, right? What do you see the future of the career is towards in that sense?
That's a good question. It's definitely a career where you have to be learning every day. It's like there's always opportunities to continue figuring stuff out. Like the job is definitely a challenging job. I feel like every day I'm learning about a new accounting rule or a new type of modeling or a new way of designing products for the competition.
Do you mind just give some examples to put us into the context?
Well, I would say when I first started 10 years ago, my first month or two, I thought I knew Excel before I started my first actuarial job, but then within the first couple months, I really learned like how to code in VBA. I learned how to code in nobody uses it anymore, but APL. Since then, I've learned there's a lot of like very specific actuarial modeling software. So I've become an expert in the one that we use, which is called Axis, which we use to project out our cash flows and reserve requirements for 100 years and see what happens. one thing that's really important for a candidate looking for an entry-level actuarial job today is, which wasn't necessarily 10 years ago, is Python and R. Having those two skills is definitely something that employers look for today. So as far as your question about where you see the skills going, I think I've definitely seen that things have gone more towards coding. Having Python and R would be a good skill set these days, whereas maybe 15 years ago it would have been having VBA and SQL. Today, I think Python is almost becoming a must-have for entry-level students.
Yeah, that's a theme that we see even today. We had some discussions on that. In the past it was Excel, right? So now it's Python. If you don't know coding, you're asking for trouble to get a job.
Usually, like, does the insurance company require you to have a specific skill of coding? Like, they require you to have a skill in Python or R, or you can choose whatever you like for modeling?
Ultimately, it's going to depend on what area you're part of. Like life insurance and other insurance companies are such big organizations that it'll really depend on what team. I know in our case, a lot of there's certain teams that deal more with like looking at how policyholder behavior has unfolded and kind of they almost are doing research on that data. So the tools that they use are a lot more like what data scientists use. Like they're doing a lot of R. Other teams, my team does a lot of we do a lot of iterations of where we try to make sure that our charges are hitting our profitability goals as well as our competitive goals. And so we're using more and more Python to do those iterations quickly so that we can kind of come up with a product quickly. In the past, we would have used Excel, but we had macros that took 2 days to run. So if we could do that in Python in 2 hours, that's much better. And then there's always going to be very company specific type software that you'll have to learn. So it's a job that's good if you want to learn a lot of different a lot of different skills and kind of see a lot of areas of the company. These are great questions, though. Thank you for them.
Thank you.
What's most exciting, I'd say, on a day-to-day for you as an actuary going in? Like what kind of activities would you say in the role are most exciting just for you? This is out of just interest.
I would say the most exciting part is like you get to see the building of a product from start to finish in my current role. I typically love a project that lasts between 4 and 6 months, and I'll go all the way from the phase where I'm just scoping it out with senior management, like what do we want this product to accomplish, what do we want to change, through the part where we design the different features, test a bunch of ideas and see if they work, ultimately to the point where we prepare presentations, kind of almost like pitching this product and showing that it meets the goals that we had laid out. I also like that I get to work with a bunch of different areas. I get to work with lawyers when I'm drafting the contracts. I get to work with systems when I'm testing for the implementation. So it's getting to work with a lot of different people and kind of getting to kind of build something is kind of nice. I mean, it's kind of sounds weird to build. You're building something, but because it's not you're not building a bridge or you're not building a building, but you are building a new product, which is always kind of nice, especially if it does well and is profitable.
Is blockchain making its way into the industry, or the concept, or the?
It hasn't made its way necessarily into my company, but it's one of those things that it's being talked about. I know when I read industry publications, I know being explored in the industry, but I don't know if there's any use of it at my company in particular. If there was, it's probably more in the exploratory phase.
Interesting. Marcella, maybe you could tell Jim a little bit some of the project that you're working on.
Sure.
Could find it interesting to see, where we've taken the program a little bit.
Sure. Sorry.
I'm asking Marcella, who's where is he? If you could tell about some of the project that he's working on.
Right.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've tapped into the blockchain space in two fronts, with one company called Inca Digital and another called Ethereum Classic Labs. So with Inca Digital, it's pretty much a data aggregating sort of exploratory outlook on the blockchain ecosystem, understanding, we're using Splunk software to pretty much gain an access and understanding where does the value lie in the current ecosystem. How do you map the ecosystem out from a transaction basis to a node or connection basis, just visualizing where the connections are. And then on the Ethereum side, which ties in with what you were talking about on product development, having a product, hopefully that's profitable. So we've pretty much delved into understanding the architecture of blockchain in its sense. And then from there, hopefully build an analyzer that's able to pretty much give us an insight into what relations exist, and then build a product off of that, which is what we're trying to do. A state analyzer at the moment, but from a personal perspective, I came to realize that as you read along most of the technology, there's so many parallels in finance, and it's actually inferred a bit of inspiration in building something related to the real estate side. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much where we are with that, with what we're working on. Hope that clarifies.
Yeah. And maybe the team that's working on sport analytics, maybe you could give a little blurb to James in terms of what you guys do.
Gotcha. Hi, James. I'm Jack. This sports analytics project is kind of my brainchild, but we got some other guys that are coming in and diving into it. Essentially what we're trying to do is, with the legalization of sports gambling, we're trying to develop a high frequency type trading strategy on sports gambling contracts. So similar to what you were saying, where you're doing like a lot of option hedging, that's essentially what we're doing. In a way, if you think about it, a sports gambling contract is a binomial future contract. So if you combo them in certain ways between books, because one book might quote you a line in something and another book quotes you a line somewhere else, there's ways you can essentially supercharge the odds while also limiting your risk for the way that you've put it down. And that's kind of what we're doing. And right now we've developed some systems to pull this data, because the data doesn't really exist as a whole. It just kind of is there live, and we're trying to create historical data sets to test this on. And then it also becomes an issue of figuring out like how much we can put into certain lines and certain spreads in such a way that, we have hedged positions and we're still creating a return both in an expected sense and in an actual sense. And that's kind of what we're doing with that now. So
those are both very interesting projects. I definitely hear a lot of chatter from my colleagues about things like blockchain as well as sports gambling. So I don't know what that says about actuaries necessarily, but it's very interesting stuff. So thank you.
Thanks.
Who else do we have? We're working on other stuff. Jordan.
Yeah, hi. So we kind of started a project that started off to explore factor investing, which is like a new way to allocate specific risk in portfolio allocation. And kind of what we did is explore like the Farmer French theory, and saw that, we saw that typically the CAPM is what's used to measure your risk allocation of your beta, but we applied more risk factors and saw that you can have a higher prediction in determining its expected return. So we kind of took that as a base case And then Brian really specialized in building a neural network to increase the predictability to see if we can minimize the error in that. And then that last stage is that we're taking those predictions and we're kind of giving them to Randy, who's going to be optimizing a portfolio based on the weight allocation determined on the neural network. So yeah, that's pretty much a wrap of it.
That's very interesting. It's always amazing the kind of things that this program teaches. I feel like I'm always kind of blown away with some of the things my colleagues from the program have ended up going on to do. So
yeah.
it's
I mean, that's something that's interesting, right? Because it's foundational, I guess, right? Where we kinds of, I mean, we have some people that graduated just about the time when you graduated, and I think we spoke to him last week, 2 weeks ago, and he's founding his new company, and he's in manufacturing, totally unrelated, although it's data. He's creating a company that does data analytics for manufacturing companies because he likes manufacturing. The you that's in actuary, you get people in risk management. Next week we're gonna have somebody that's actually doing programming, investment banking. So it's and especially now, right? It's very challenging, I think, for people to interviews and get through. Do you guys have like internships and things like that, or you actually need to start taking exam even for an internship?
One tough thing with this career path is a lot of people do get into it on the earlier side. There's a lot of like undergraduate programs in actuarial. Mm-hmm. We tend to scoop up a lot of internships and co-ops from those programs. So a lot of people we hire do come in with having already had an internship or a co-op. So yeah, if you, an internship is definitely helpful. But then again, it's not impossible to get a entry level position. If you just having a couple exams is kind of what you would just need to have to show that you're kind of.
I mean, let us know if you guys have because I know a lot of students are looking for internship this summer. So if you hear of any way to apply for those, that'd be great.
There's always like fall. I think there's a posting for fall co-ops. Mm-hmm. Be like a 6-month term. So I don't know if that's necessarily applicable, but I'm definitely happy to talk to anyone who's kind of considering. Okay. More specifically.
Sure. I'll create a link LinkedIn, a little group chat, so people from the people that ask you questions, in case they want to pursue the discussion a bit later on. Yeah, any more questions for Jim? No? Okay.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. I know. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting career path. I mean, you could use your talents to make a positive impact in some sense. I mean, we all need health insurance, pensions, life insurance. So it's definitely a mentally stimulating work. So I appreciate the chance to kind of talk about it. And
please, I mean, this was most welcome. And I know that we spoke in the past. And I'll make sure that the students are aware of this particular, I mean, it's not just big data and hedge funds. You could also work in that field. I mean, but I think it's taken. So Jim, thank you very much for your time today.
Of course. Hope you all enjoy your weekend and enjoy the rest of the program.
Thank you.